Thank you very much. Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Gray-Thompson, I am particularly interested in your experiences on the ground and working with these families that have been affected. And these families obviously are the essentially the end users of the programs and processes that we as appropriators at state and federal agencies put into place. But despite the central importance of these individuals and families, their direct experiences with these programs are likely not taken into consideration as often as they should be. And we're always looking for insight from those of you who have that direct contact. What insights can you share about the experiences of disaster-affected individuals and families when dealing with federal disaster response and recovery programs? What would you like for us to know that you think would be helpful to us?
I would like to know how to turn my mic. I got it. Okay. I would like you to know that every community when they go through a disaster, the first thing they find is it's the shock and the trauma, but the secondary trauma comes from dealing with the federal government. A lot of the denials, and we understand that fraud is a major issue, but they're always very surprised by the processes and the programs that we have in place. This is never more true in areas that have distrust of government. I see this in rural communities, like in Plumas County, even in Butte County with the Camp Fire, but I see it a lot in Maui because there's the historical problems around colonialism, and so that adds into it as well. The experiences of these families are incredibly challenging because they can't believe how slow it is. It's the uncertainty, and they can do much better if they just had, even if within a 12-month period idea of when they can get home. In a mega fire, we have nothing to muck. It's all gone. We don't have any blue tarps. Our cars are gone. It's 3 inches of oily ash. And so that alone is shocking, but then to actually have to navigate the very slow system, especially with regard to housing. Housing is medicine. It's how people get home. All of us, think about if you had to come to work today and your stuff is in a bucket, and you had to move hotels 4 times last week, but you're still working 3 jobs because you didn't hear that you can defer your mortgage. And it feels there's secondary trauma that comes all the time from how our system operates. And I feel like as really the seat of innovation in this country, that we can certainly do better by them. So thank you for that question.
And while I am pleased to co-sponsor the Reforming Disaster Recovery Act, I recognize that there remains a potentially long road ahead and many conversations yet to be had in the Senate as well as with the House before getting this authorization enacted. But unfortunately, while the legislative process is ongoing, the need for disaster recovery work is ongoing as well. And it is clear that program and process improvements should not wait until we get the authorization across the finish line, because we know how slow this can be. So, Mr. Donovan and Mr. Reinhard, relying on your years of experiencing navigating the CDBG-DR funding and requirements, what can HUD do now without waiting for passage of the authorization bill to improve the effectiveness of either the state and local grantees or the experience of the individual and the families that rely on this assistance to rebuild their lives and community? And Mr. Donovan, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Senator. The first thing I would say is that moving quickly within the allocations that HUD receives is absolutely critical. Giving certainty, giving it as early as possible, and even before there's perfect information, there's data still being collected about the depth of the needs, to move quickly with initial allocations that allow communities to start planning and move forward. I would also say, and Jennifer mentioned this a moment ago, the specific needs of smaller communities tribal and rural communities is especially important. And so what I saw in my experience is that the kind of technical assistance that we've talked about is enormously important. But also, for example, working to build regional partnerships. If you have a community that literally has one part-time staffer who's responsible for doing the planning, but you have communities, say, in Mississippi, I saw this regularly, small communities along the coast that are all facing very similar issues. Bringing them together for regional convenings and regional technical assistance can be an important piece. The other part I would say on that is showing flexibility where there are needs to do waivers or other steps. And another example from Mississippi, the ability to work closely with nonprofit partners or others. Habitat for Humanity was enormously important in the recovery after Katrina, and there needed to be some changes to CDBG-DR and to provide flexibility to be able to work with those organizations more effectively. I think there are things that Congress could do in the permanent authorization on that, but there is work that can be done with at HUD along those lines.
So when you talk about the assistance of the technical adventures there, you're saying to have someone to help these people, a greater staff, broader staff as people come in?
Exactly right. So the ability to get technical experts, contractors that can step in very quickly, help communities, particularly smaller rural communities, understand the rules. It's especially true right now because each allocation is different under CDBG-DR, that there need to be changes to the programs based on the specific statutory language. That compounds the problem and is one reason why having a permanent authorization would help. But that sort of hand-holding and working with communities to say, here's the way you put together an action plan, here's the way you work with HUD, here's what other communities have done that's innovative, that worked well, maybe you could replicate that. All of those things are really important, especially for smaller and rural and tribal communities.
Okay, and Mr. Reinhard?
Thank you, Senator. I'd break it down to just a couple things. One, I'll echo what Mr. Donovan said, which is technical assistance. You've got to get it to them pretty quickly, especially if they're a first time or they're a small capacity grantee. That can come in the form of either contractors, HUD staff, or just other grantees that have gone through the same experience. In 2015, when we were hit, and we hadn't been hit since Hugo in '89, we called everybody. We called Mississippi, we called Louisiana, we called Texas, and asked them what worked and what didn't work. And that was very helpful in developing our program. I think HUD can also immediately get into make CDBG, the program, and the Federal Register that comes out for it a little more predictable. It doesn't need to change every time. They could stick the timeline up front, make it easy for people to read and grantees to understand. Here's the timeline that you're facing. How many days do you have before you got to get an implementation plan? How many days before financial certifications are due? How long is HUD going to take to review it? Let them know early on as much as possible that they are going to get a grant so that they can pass that on to their people and build expectation management. If no word comes out, people sit with no hope. But if they know something's coming, even if it's going to take a little while to get there, that at least gives them hope. And the last thing I'd say is, let's get ahead of the disasters. Let's go to communities, have HUD go to the communities, and train those small communities that have yet to be hit on how, if and when you get hit, this is how you do disaster recovery. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hyde-Smith. Senator Bozeman.